Welcome friends and followers to this tutorial part 3 for flying on Vatsim. To get started, it's easier to choose a Cessna airplane and fly according to visual flight rules. The alternative is EFR, which is instrument flight rules, but that's a little bit more complicated, and I will come back to that with later video tutorials. Visual flight rules is basically that you are going to rely on what you see from the cockpits, such as wind parks, rivers, shorelines, mountain peaks, and you are going to let yourself be guided by what you see. Now, to be able to fly and depart on an airport or arrive at an airport with a visual flight rule flight plan, you need to look at the classification of the airspace. If I have a look at Navigraph charts and I enable the VFR mode, then if you zoom in, you will see that around airports there are some kinds of circles, such as here at Casale, for instance, we have this circle, and you can see that it is notified by D delta grounds. So this is a classification of delta. You have other types of classifications. Let me look for one here in Greece. For instance, at Garitsa, it's also delta. But if I would, for instance, go to here, there you see that the classification is C, Charlie. Now, what does that mean? Well, actually, if you have a Charlie classification, then VFR is possible. If you have a Bravo classification, or a Delta classification, or an Echo classification, or a Frankfurt classification, or a Golf classification, VFR is possible. The only case where VFR is not possible, where you have not a controlled tower for VFR, is when you have an Alpha classification. Now we are going to do an example flight on the west coast of Greece. As you can see, we have here Zakynthos in the south, and we are going to depart from Zakynthos, and we can do this with VFR flight rules. As you can see that it is a D delta classification, which is the right class type of airport. And also at our destination in the north here, at Kefalonia, it's a D type air class classification, so we have the possibility to fly according to visual flight rules. Now, here you have an image that depicts the airport of Zakynthos, and we are at stand Sierra 1. As I have shown in the tutorial part 2, there is a standard way of communicating with ATC on Vatsim. The following slides are going to show how you would typically communicate with ATC for an entire flight. Note that there may be some variations in how this communication with ATC will be, but this is to show you the general flow of the conversation for an entire flight. So here we are at Sierra, and before we start up the plane, you would say Athena Center. Well, let me take a little step back here. Normally you would talk to Zakynthos delivery, but from experience I know that when Vatsim is online, usually it is the highest bubble up of ATC controllers that is available. In this case, this would be Athena Center. So you would say Athena Center, identify yourself, Oscar 8422. Is a Cessna 172, what you are, at parking stand Sierra 1, request startup. ATC will answer Oscar 8422, startup approved. And you would confirm that you have understood the message by saying startup approved, Oscar 8422. At that moment, you would start up your engines. Then you need to ask clearance. Even for VFR, you need to ask clearance. So how would that go? You would say, Athena Center, Oscar Oscar 8422, request VFR to Kefalonia. And then you would get some information that is important for your takeoff. ATC would say, Oscar Oscar 8422, clear to Kefalonia, departure runway 34. After takeoff, climb 4,000 feet, follow coastline, stroke 7,000. So a couple of important things here. We are given the runway 34. We know that we have to fly at 4,000 feet. And we have to enter our stroke codes into the avionics because in this way ATC can keep track of us on their visual instruments. After that, you have to say again and repeat what has been said so that they know that you fully understood them. So you would say clear to Kefalonia, departure runway 34. After takeoff, climb 4,000 feet, follow coastline, stroke 7,000, and you append it with your call sign Oscar Oscar 8422. Note, this is the most complicated part of the entire flight. For the rest, it's much more simple. And then it's time to taxi. You would say Athena Center, Oscar Oscar 8422, request taxi to runway 34. Remember, we got the assignment of runway 34 in our clearance earlier on. And let's say that they would send us along this route to the starting point of runway 34. Then they would say Oscar Oscar 8422, taxi via A, hold short Alpha 1. So we are not cleared yet to go on runway 1. We have to hold short at this point here. So we say taxi via A, hold short Alpha 1, Oscar Oscar 8422. And it is when we are at Alpha 1 holding short of the runway that we say holding short Alpha 1, Oscar Oscar 8422. And ATC will answer Oscar Oscar 8422, backtrack runway 32. That means you can go on runway 32 to the starting point. And then we would say backtrack runway 32, Oscar Oscar 8422. At that point, we arrive at the start of runway 32 and we simply ask for takeoff by saying Athena Center, Oscar Oscar 8422, ready for takeoff. ATC will answer Oscar Oscar 842, takeoff approved. And we repeat, takeoff approved, Oscar Oscar 842. Now, look at the picture. We will be airborne and we will be taking it to the skies. It's important that we let us be identified, as it is said, by ATC. And this is how we do it. Athena Center, Oscar Oscar 842, northwest of Zakynthos, climbing 2,500 feet, because I estimate that we are climbing through 2,500 feet. And ATC would answer Oscar Oscar 842, identified, and they could give an instruction like climb 4,000 feet, which you repeat by saying climb 4,000 feet, Oscar Oscar 8422. Now, as we are going to land at Kefalonia, as you can see at this airport, we want to know, is it the default right-hand entry pattern, or will we get the left-hand entry pattern? So you want to prepare for landing early on. As you can see by the icon of the plane, we are still far away from Kefalonia, but this would be a good time to ask for airport information, as this is said. So you would say Athena Center, Oscar Oscar 842, where you are, inbound Kefalonia, that's the most general way, and then request airport information. And then you would get something like Oscar Oscar 842, expect runway 14, that's important information because there's two sides to a runway, so we have runway 14, left-hand entry pattern. So you would repeat, expecting runway 14, left-hand entry pattern, Oscar Oscar 842. Now, what is the left-hand entry pattern? As you can see on the image here on the left side, if the wind is blowing in this direction, you would fly downwind on the downwind leg, so that you have to take a left-hand side turn, 2 times a left-hand side turn to touch down on the runway. So in our case, if we would be at this location, we would fly on the right hand side of runway 14 downwind, and then we would hit base and then final. At a certain point, you want to announce that you are ready to land. So for declaring landing, you will be still quite a distance from the airport. You don't need a visual of the runway, and you say Athena Center, Oscar 842, 5 miles southwest of Kefalonia, inbound for landing. And typically the answer would be Oscar 842, report runway in sight. That means contact me again once you see the runway. You say, will report runway in sight, Oscar 842. And then there is a point that we see the runway actually. We are still flying the downwind leg. And we say, okay, Athena Center, Oscar 842, runway in sight. And then they would give some instructions, Oscar 842, maintain 1,500 feet above the runway, report base. So what does that mean? That means keep an altitude of 2,500 above the altitude of the airport, and report base is contact ATC again once you are here at the base leg. So you repeat what I say, 1,500 feet above runway, will report base Oscar 842. And then at the end, you are on taking a left turn on the base leg, and you would say Athena Center, Oscar 842 at base. And then you will get landing clearance, Oscar 842, clear to land runway 14. And you confirm by saying clear to land runway 14, Oscar 842. You take a last left turn and you land on runway 14. And the last step is let's say that you evacuate at Kefalonia at exit point Alpha 1. Then you will stop your airplane and you will contact again Athena Center and say Athena Center, Oscar 842, vacated runway 14, request taxi. And Oscar 842, taxi to stand Papa. And you confirm taxi to stand Papa Oscar 842. And this brings us to the end of this tutorial. I hope that you can take your time to go slowly through this, and you can even try to fly this flight path here in Athens, right there, and well, not Athens, but in Greece, from Zakynthos to Kefalonia. So, if this brings you up to speed with Vatsim, I expect to give more tutorials. My next video will be this flight here, this specific flight from Zakynthos to Kefalonia with a Skyhawk 172, flying VFR fly rules on Vatsim. You will then note that there are some variations in how the communication is. It depends also on the strictness of the ATC controller, and you will be able to learn from that too. And then in later video tutorials, I will explain also what to do for Vatsim IFR instrument flight rules flights. So thank you for watching. Please give me a thumbs up, and if you have questions, you can always address and post them to me down here. Bye bye from Sonic Gazelle Pilot.